Hello guys, welcome back to our React tutorial series. In our last video we talked about state management in React. We talked about the global and the local state in React. So in this video we're going to move a bit further. We're going to talk about two important tools in React state management, which of course we know as the Context API and the Redux. Remember, in React, when your application grows and you need to manage multiple states at a time, you start thinking about the global state. You start hearing things like Context API and Redux, and that is why we are making this video, to break it down clearly: when to use Context API, how to use it, how to use Redux, and what they really are. So before we proceed, we're going to talk about what is global state. We're going to make a recap of that. So global state is data that many components needs to access or update, like a logged in user, a cart, or theme setting. When one component updates the data, every other component that depends on this data will have to re-render with the new data that is being passed. So what is Context API? So Context API is built into React. There is no need for installation, perfect for simple global state management, right? This is what the Context API looks like. We have the theme context. We can create using the create context hook, and we have our app, and every other thing is going to be wrapped around our Context API. Now, any component inside this page can have access to whatever value the Context API is providing to them. Be it profile page, login page, sign up page, we now have access to this value. So on the other hand, we have another tool called the Redux. So Redux is a standalone state management library. You install it separately and connect it to your React application. It means it is a standalone library that you need to install, unlike the Context API that is inbuilt. When you install it, you configure it before you can use it to manage your React state. It uses a central store, and all components talk to it through actions and reducers. In React Redux, there's what we call the action and the reducer. This is how every component relates to this central or global state in our React application. So now we're going to move over to the 6 key difference between the Context API and the Redux, comparing their features, right? Here we said built-in, the Context API is built-in, Redux is not built-in, it needs installation. We're talking about boilerplates. Boilerplates means the amount of code we need to configure each of these tools. We say the Context API has a minimal boilerplate, while the Redux has more setup or requires more setup. So if you're building an application and you don't need more setup, consider the Context API for your global state management. When we talk about performance, it may re-render too much. I mean Context API, but the Redux optimized with selectors. We talk about the dev tools. The Context API does not have any built-in dev tool. The Redux API, the Redux tool has a Redux dev tool that will help you to debug. Right? We talk about async logic. There is no needs workaround. So you need to work out this async logic. But for the Redux, there's a middleware like Tonk or Saga that helps you to implement your async logic. Scalability, not ideal for large application. Please take note of this. Your Context API is not ideal for large application, while your Redux, of course, is built for large scale application. So we'll move over to when to use Context API. Remember, you only use Context API when you need to pass a few value like theme, all status, and every other thing. And we also use the Context API when the app is small to medium size. Remember, app small to medium size. And we also use the Context API when you want minimal setup and fast development. You're building an app, a React app that it's just too small and that you need a fast and a minimal setup. Use your Context API. Example of those use cases are your light and dark theme, user authentication, local language, and etc. This is when you consider to use your Context API. But when do you use the Redux? You use the Redux when the app has complex shared data. For example, you're building an app where you manage financial record, you have plenty store that's linked to another store that has plenty users. You have complex and shared data like the filter, cards, dashboards, etc. You need to use the Redux because it gives you it's built for large scale applications. You use Redux when you need predictability, login, undo, redo, or debugging tools. This is basically what we talked about here in our dev tools. So we say the Redux has a dev tool that will help you to do all of this when you want to do login and Redux and undo and redo debugging tools and all of that. We also say we use Redux when you want to scale your state architecture, you want to scale it, you want to improve it. You have 10 users or 10 users, and tomorrow you have 2,000 users, and you want to scale your state management, you use your Redux. Example of those use cases, we have the e-commerce, cart and inventory, we have the complex forms with nested fields, admin dashboard with real-time updates, collaborative tools like Trello and all of that. So another important question I want to answer is popular questions I've received where most persons will ask me, can I use both Redux and Context API in one application? The answer is yes. You can use both your Redux and your Context API in one application. You can just decide to use your Context API for things like themes and use your Redux for heavy stuff, right? So you can use both of them in one application. So summarily, I would want to say Context API is fast, simple, but limited to just small application, while your Redux is powerful, scalable, with more setup and with, of course, more boilerplate. It is used for a very large application. Use the right tool for the right job whenever you want to build your application. Don't add Redux just because everyone is doing it. Start with Context API. If it grows beyond that, you can always refactor and have your Redux. In our next video, we're going to see how to use the Redux toolkit in our application. We're going to see the setup, and we're going to use it practically. If this was helpful to you guys, please don't forget to like, don't forget to subscribe, don't forget to share, drop your comment if you have a question. See you guys in the next video. Bye.